JJK Chapter review. Alright everyone, hello, Eternal Flame here. Welcome to my Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 232 review. Because the chapter just came out recently as I'm recording it. Like, literally I saw it, like I refreshed the page and it was there and I was like, oh, now is my time. I must record. Anyways, welcome to Chapter 232, the decisive battle in the uninhabited demon-infested Shinjuku, Part 10, because Gege doesn't have creative names. The countdown of fate waits for no one. And let's get straight into this chapter review and also kind of my live reaction because this is my first time actually reading the chapter and not just spoilers. So the chapter starts out with Sukuna being launched back and Gojo chasing after him and the birds flying after the two of them, just flying for their own life to make sure they can keep recording this battle. I'll say it and I'll say it again, those birds are the real champion of this battle because they are the only ones that are keeping up and actually flying after them up to this point, and these birds are just impressive. But also, we just see the battle continue, and then we get a scene from Yuji where Yuji just says there's the second spin, 2 more spins and it will adapt to Gojo's Infinity, was said by Kusakabe, and they're all just like, hurry it up, Gojo, because Sukuna is starting to adapt really fast because the wheel is adapting really fast by this point, and we all can kind of see it, and like there's a bunch of people just being worried for Gojo, and it makes a lot of sense. The students are all worried for Gojo by this point, and then we get to see the battle continues where Gojo yeets a bunch of like parts of buildings at Sukuna, but that's not gonna work, it's Sukuna. But then we get to see what I think is one of the coolest moves that Gojo has pulled off, where he made 8 blues appear in the same shape as Mahoraga's Dharma Chakra wheel, and just made them all appear around Sukuna to try and go for him all at once and just yeet a bunch of things at him. And like, it's a really cool move. I genuinely love Gojo's creativity. It's really awesome. Of course, it doesn't really do much because it's just like yeeting a bunch of parts of buildings at Sukuna, but at the same time, it looks really cool, and Gojo uses that in order to try and knee him while pulling his leg back. The hand-to-hand mixed in with Gojo using his abilities is really sick, because you can tell Gojo is in a rush right now and actually trying to win this, and he actually managed to do damage with that hand-to-hand. But unfortunately, that's when the third spin comes in, and I just love this hand-to-hand choreography so much already. Like, jeez, it is amazing. And we get to see Hakari's worried reaction. I love it. Hakari's worried reaction is amazing. Like, it's so funny. And then Yuji just starts to question how the wheel actually works. Yuji's first hypothesis is it time that needed for the adaptation, or is it experience? And this also introduces something kinda interesting. It means that Yuji remembers everything that Sukuna did and like seeing it, but he does not remember anything Sukuna heard or thought, because Sukuna figured out what the weakness was and how it adapted, but Yuji doesn't remember it, which means he likely only remembers what he said and not what he thought, which also makes a lot of sense because he didn't remember a lot of things, like Kenjaku talking to him and Urame talking to him. So it makes a lot of sense that they remember him, but just don't remember how it works exactly. And then Kusakabe just like, he's at first a bit confused, but then he realized what he meant. You're asking, does it take the attack once, take time to understand it, and then adapt? I'm sorry, the English is really weird. And then, or B, adapt incrementally after taking the attack multiple times. And then Kusakabe is just like, I don't know really, but well, considering Gojo hasn't used any technique aside from laps, which could it be? Like, Kusakabe is just theorizing, and then Kashimo is just like, alright, either way, it adapts. It doesn't really matter how it adapts, you nerds. You nerds. You don't need to know how exactly it adapts. And I love Kashimo for that, because this is very similar to back when Kashimo was fighting against Hakari, and he was like, if I really wanted to, I could just kill Hakari in between the time of Jackpot, but that's what losers would do. That's how a loser would approach this fight. I'm gonna approach this fight different. I'm going to kill you while it's immortal. And Kashimo's approaching this with the same level of tenacity of like, okay, you can adapt. I could kill you before I adapt, but I'm going to not do that. I'm not saying Kashimo's capable of doing that. Power scaling nerds, don't come at me. All I'm saying is that is how Kashimo approaches things. And I love Kashimo for that because he's just like, either option is possible. That's all there is to it. You don't need to think about it more. And then we get back to the fight, and I just need to say, those crows are hanging on for dear life. The fact they're keeping up with these crows are Toji levels of speed, if not faster, and I find that so funny that they're just keeping up for dear life. Like, how are they doing this? That's for another day. Mei, you are impressive. And it's just incredible because we see Gojo jumping through an entire window. Now I'll give him hell. And Gojo has basically been playing this really smart plan where he's been trying to convince Sukuna that all he plans to use is blue, and he won't be able to react because he won't be accepting a curse technique reversal red out of nowhere like what Gojo actually does. And it's a really smart play, because this is also something that I would do unironically. Like, force someone to think you're only going to do one exact tactic, but you have several tactics in mind, and you're just doing this all as a divergent. Like, force someone that you're only going to do one direct tactic, only to surprise them off guard with your actual more powerful move, because Reversal Red is bare minimum 2 times as powerful as Blue, because it takes double the cursed energy, if not massively more, considering how it does against Toji when he was, like, post-awakened. And yeah, he blasts Sukuna right in the face with a red right off the bat. But Sukuna used Domain Amplification to minimize the damage, which is really interesting how Amplification works. If Yuji learned Domain Amplification, he would be so powerful, because that would be a good way to equalize it. But that's beside the point. But we also learned that Domain Amplification can neutralize the low output of his neutral Limitless. It can't fully neutralize the Strength in Blue or the Reversal Red, which makes a lot of sense. Like, we knew Amplification did have its limits because of what happened in Jogo versus Gojo in the fight against Shibuya. Not Shibuya. Is it Shibuya? Yeah, it's Shibuya. I'm messing up today. We then get to see that he misread it at this rate, and Sukuna is getting closer and closer to adapting. As Higuruma said, he misread it at this rate, and Yuji says it'll adapt, and Sukuna just says, "You're being sloppy. You lost your cool after your hand was red." And Sukuna basically is saying, yeah, no, I knew what you were doing. I knew you were trying to make me think that I wasn't going to use a red. I'm kind of too old for that, man. That ain't going to work on me. Or at least that's what Gojo wanted him to believe, because the red went back and turned around and hit him straight in the back, yeeting Sukuna straight into Gojo after getting that behind hit, only for BAM! Gojo to immediately use the Black Flash, and for us to get everyone's surprise face with Yuji being like, Black Flash. This was already built up, the fact that Gojo could use the Black Flash, but still. And Sukuna's eyes go white. I don't think Sukuna was knocked out. Like, I know a lot of people are saying Sukuna was knocked out from this punch. The thing is, you need to be mentally conscious to summon 10 shadows. I don't think you can just unconsciously summon 10 shadows, because there's also just a ritual that goes part of it, so unless there was like a binding vow that involved and Sukuna like planned all this out, it's really weird, but I just do not think they are knocked out. Furthermore, when Mahito was getting double teamed by Yuji and Nanami, his eyes were also going white, but he wasn't knocked out as well, so yeah, no, just because his eyes went white doesn't mean he was knocked out. But then we see Gojo start to drip into the shadows, and that means the shadows, weirdly enough, are kinda adapted to Infinity as well as Mahoraga, which is something kinda interesting, because the shadows are also able to reach him. It's not like it's just Mahoraga's hand that reaches him, it's also the shadows that wrap around his leg, which means the shadows also have adapted to Infinity, which might be something really interesting that I want to talk about another day. But yeah, Mahoraga then rises up with his big hand about to grab Gojo to try and pull him into his knife, and it's like, Mahoraga's hand in comparison to Gojo is just so funny, in my opinion. But then we get Yuji and Yuta just being really worried for their teacher, and then Mahoraga lands a slash on Gojo. That sword encroaches upon his life. Chapter 232, end. And there are a few things that I want to talk about with this chapter. I kind of like this chapter. It's a lot better than the previous chapter, in my opinion. But also, my issue is, right, and like I was going to make an entire video about this, but I can talk about this now with this entire thing. There is no difference between how this chapter ended and the chapter where Mahoraga Shattered the Domain ended. Like, this is my issue with this entire thing. Gege did not need to wait 3 chapters to give the entire wheel potential adaptation thing, in my opinion, until, like, we get later info about the battle. But my issue is, Gege didn't need to write it this way. He could have just had Mahoraga appear immediately, and that's how the fight began. Because, like, I feel this would have so much more impact if Mahoraga wasn't already shown once. And yeah, like, you didn't need to write it this way, in my opinion. I do just want to establish this fact, that while Gege did actually make it so the logic for why he did it made a lot of sense, the logic making sense doesn't take away from the fact that Mahoraga already had a cool entrance at first, the first time he was summoned, and that this cool entrance diminishes his entrance this time. And that is my issue with the entire thing. This should have been Mahoraga's first entrance, not his second entrance, is what I'm saying. However, that's just my thoughts on why Mahoraga coming out right now just wasn't as good in comparison, because we already saw Mahoraga come out once. But at the same time, it's not too bad, at least. But the thing I really like about this chapter is just how creative Gojo is with his usage of blue and red. I love the 8-ringed blue. That is what I'm calling it, 8-ringed blue. Until we get a nickname for it and what that application is called, I'm going to call it 8-ring blue. As well as the reversal red and its ability to turn. That was really cool in my opinion. That was a really smart way of Gojo dealing with this and catching Sukuna off guard. It was sick, and getting to see Gojo do the Black Flash, it was okay in my opinion. The reason that I only found it okay was purely because that should have been the chapter ender, I'm not gonna lie. I feel we shouldn't have gotten MAHORAGA as a chapter ender purely because we've already gotten MAHORAGA as a chapter ender once, so we already knew he was going to come up in this fight again, but seeing Gojo do the Black Flash and ending it that way, it would have been sick. But no. Like, that's just my other issue with this fight, but other than that, I genuinely really like this fight. I like this chapter a lot. It's a lot better than the previous one, in my opinion. And I don't really have many issues with this chapter. I think it was overall sick. I love Kashimo's attitude. It was just awesome to see Gojo being Gojo and Sukuna have to like figure out ways around it because he can't use his curse technique either right now, is something notable. Sukuna can't use his curse technique because he cannot hit Gojo, purely because of Infinity and the Limitless Barrier. So Sukuna has to figure out how to do this smartly by only using domain amplification and surviving for long enough periods of time, especially because, well, when domain amplification is active, the wheel does not work. So overall, I just think this was a really cool chapter. This was a really cool fight. I loved seeing everyone's reaction, their theorizing on how this could work, and then Kashimo just being like, stop theorizing. It changes nothing. Whether we know how it adapts or not, it doesn't matter because it will adapt either way. It's not like we're going to get to Sukuna either way. Just deal with the adaptation when it happens and kill it before it can adapt. It's pretty simple. That is how Kashimo treats it in my opinion. That's how I think he is treating it right now. I think this was a decent chapter overall. Like, it was pretty good, but I don't really have many issues with it. Like, I loved seeing Gojo use the Black Flash and how we fought, which I've already made clear. There aren't really many things to talk about in this fight, though, or this chapter, because it was mainly just Gojo used his abilities in several new ways, and then MAHORAGA came out and landed the slash and theorizing about how it could work. Other than that, it was a pretty good chapter. So I'm going to give this chapter an overall rating of 7.2 out of 10, in my opinion. It's good, but it's not perfect. There are issues with it that come especially from the fact that previous chapters kind of hold it down, especially with MAHORAGA already getting his really cool entrance beforehand, so it just kind of undersold this entrance for him, in my opinion. However, that's just my opinion on this chapter. Now I want to hear your opinion down below in the comments. I'm gonna see y'all later. Peace.